every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He's a sport doctor, of course, an author and developer, none other than Mr. Tommy Rhee or Dr. Tommy Rhee.
Hey Daniel, how you doing? Thank you very much for this invite.
Welcome, Dr. Tommy on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Well, of course, I'm Dr. Tommy Rhee. I'm in the sports chiropractic world, and I really emphasize on the activity and the body and emotion of a patient athlete, and finding out the natural and their normal, and then finding out if they're in some type of irregular biomechanics, and really just tune into that kind of side of it, and then fix that stuff. So when it comes to the sports world, it evolves into thinking about like prehab, then the rehab, and really just help them heal faster. So when you go in that realm, you go into where I'm came from collegiate level at UCLA, being the team doctor there, then moving on to the team doctor with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here in Tampa. And then, working with Olympians and being in that kind of stage of like USA qualifications, Olympic qualifications, and in that sporting world, you get to see all that kind of like aggressive trauma to someone's body. And then from there, you take it and you put it into the environment of how do they recover? How do they get better faster? And that's how I moved into regenerative medicine, stem cell therapy. So I've seen that evolve from all the way from prototherapy, PRP to where it's at stem cell therapy. And it's that new type of industry that's coming up, and it's a fantastic feature for us to have to heal faster.
Fantastic indeed, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Dr. Tommy. Thank you. And today let's talk about regenerative signaling versus stem cells, a clinician guide to longevity medicine. So tell us what is all about.
Okay, so we all heard the word of like stem cell therapy, and we're gonna get some stem cells in us. So you hear these clinics talk about, I'm gonna get 10 million live cells in my body, or I'm gonna get this stuff that comes from the umbilical cord or somewhere else, and then I'm gonna inject it into my body, and it's gonna help me heal faster. So people think that these cells are what turns into our damaged tissue. Well, that's the problem. It's not so much that cell that we take from the actual like the umbilical cord that's going to somehow mutate into our tissue. It's not. If you just go down to basic biology, you have these codes in your chromosomes that dictate what that cell is going to turn into as you replicate or regenerate. So there's no way that those donor cells are going to be in a chromosome matched to your existing tissues and a chromosome. It's impossible. So then you take the next step. Well, it's doing something because it regenerates. It does something. So the next thing you think about is the signaling. And that's what's important. So these particular cells, they secrete these things called extracellular vesicles. It's like cell-free type of signals in the form of like proteins, microRNAs, or something that has like information to do something to your existing tissue. Like right now, we have signals in our body, right? So we have information in the form of hormones to say, all right, do something. Like for instance, secrete some type of, like in the endocrine system, think about like secreting like insulin from your pancreas, or you're getting some signaling, right? So
Mhm.
now you take the same type of information and signaling and you move it into regenerative tissue. It has that information and signals into your target tissue to regenerate. And that's what this is all about. It's getting the right information that's more vibrant and more like powerful in the signaling ability, just like anything else. So the big thing that I know is that as we age, and I'm at that age at 50, our signals kind of slow down. It's not as strong as if we were like younger in our 20s and our teenage. So now you're looking for that strong signal, and that strong signal comes in the form of that particular donor tissue from the umbilical cord that has the higher signaling ability. So that's what this is all about.
Yes, I like that. Signaling, Dr. Tommy. And tell us, what are the most common misconceptions clinicians and patients have about stem cell therapies that you aim to correct with that signaling focus model?
Okay, so the big thing that I like to really emphasize is this live cells. Think about what you're asking. You're asking this particular live cell that has, its cell membrane, the helpers, and then the nucleus that has the actual components of the chromosome and their DNA. You don't want a live cell to go into your body because you're going to say that that particular chromosome that was taken from a tissue and now it's in your body, it's going to replicate into something. It's going to turn it either like maybe that particular chromosome was supposed to be like a hair follicle, or could it be something else? You have to be careful. So that's why you want cell free. You new look, live cell is, it sounds like a great type of like buzzword, but it's also dangerous because you take a live cell with chromosomes and the DNA, it's going to do something and it's going to turn into something, and that something could be a tumor formation. You've got to be careful with that. So you don't really want this, you don't want the cell with the nucleus and the chromosome and DNA. You want the signals that are secreted from those cells to give that information to your existing tissue to turn on and wake up.
Dr. Tommy, how do you define regenerative signaling in a clinical context? Is it primarily about specific molecules, or does it encompass a broader systemic approach to communication?
Well, I think the definition of regenerative medicine is a very broad. I mean, that could take forms of an equipment, a modality, a device. It could be like stem cell. It's anything that engages your existing tissue to turn on, to heal, regenerate, and basically get back to its normal function as soon as possible. So again, that's a large class. So then there's particular classes when you look at like modalities, or even mental, like like meditation can do things. Diet could do it. There's a lot of like sections of that regenerative medicine. The one that we focus on are like stem cells and then the actual signals from the stem cells.
Interesting, Dr. Tommy. So let's go into the why. At a cellular level, what are the key limitations of exogenous stem cell therapies that signaling strategies elegantly avoid?
Can you rephrase that question?
So, at the cellular level, what are the limitations that you will give it to us, that so that it will remind us that this is not supposed to be like this, but like that?
All right. So at the cellular level, think about what you're trying to do. You're trying to heal a tissue that's either like been damaged in an injury, or is it something that has to do with aging process? So you want to rebuild the tissue. So our body always destroys tissue and rebuilds it. We want a 1-to-1 ratio. So, as we tear away, our muscles, we build muscles, 1-to-1 ratio. So the thing is that when you go down to the molecular side of the cells, you want to think like, all right, we have an adult stem cell that makes these particular cells divide and make other cells to make muscle. For instance, like a muscle cell. A muscle cell is the signalers that we have to wake up to make more of the myosin, those fibrins that make the muscle fibers. The problem is that these satellite cells will decrease in its function because when you look at the chromosomes, at the very ends of chromosome, there's a thing called telomeres. Telomeres will decrease after replication for a long period of time, and then they cease because they're a protecting mechanism so that replication or making more of these cells stop. You need to increase that stuff. So you have to get down to the easy, simple step of the biology and the molecular and the chromosome and the telomeres. It's all about that when you come down to regenerative in that cellular level.
How do regenerative signals work to wake up and modulate a patient's on indigenous stem cell niches. Can you describe the prime example of this mechanism?
Okay, the prime example right now in our body, as far as what we use adult stem cells, think about like a tendinocyte, or let me break it down a little bit more. Let me try to get the best easy example that I can think that could relate to what we're talking about. So think about you have a cell that has a certain age, right? A lifespan of a cell. Well, that cell has to go through apoptosis. It has to die off. So when it dies off, you have to replace it with another cell. When that other cell has to be regulated and signaled by an adult stem cell to say, all right, make that cell to replace the dying off cell, a 1-to-1 ratio. One dies, one grows. One dies, one grows. So we have millions of these cells in our body, each with their different components and function. So as we have that 1-to-1 ratio, we're doing fine. As we get injured or we age, that ratio starts slowing down. It becomes maybe two dies, one gets rebuilt. Two dies, one gets rebuilt. We don't have that large signal to turn on that particular adult stem cells to make that cell go to 1-to-1 ratio. So we have to introduce a large signal to turn on to make that 1-to-1 ratio occur again. And that's what regenerative medicine stem cell therapy is all about. And that's the signalers. Did that make sense?
Interesting, Miss Dr. Tommy. Interesting and makes sense indeed. So, the microenvironment or stem cell nest is a crucial. How do cell free approaches optimize these nets to repair or for repair as opposed to just dumping cell into a potential hostile environment?
Yeah. So there's two things that have to go on. So your existing tissue has to have some type of like an ability to read this information. So when it secretes the information, so there's the information that's sending out, say, hey, I need help, right? So then when you introduce those EVs, those cell-free molecules, you're looking, the information gets in there. It has to hone. It hones into that area that has the damaged tissue. So it just kind of like, think about like it's just sitting floating around and all of a sudden there's a whistle. The whistle is the injured area. And all of a sudden that EBs or those like signals are like a dog and they hear the whistle, they go towards the whistle and then they signal the existing tissue to turn on.
What role does immune system modulation play in this signaling approach, Dr. Tommy? Is it significant part of the benefit about changing the body's inflammatory or conversation?
So the one thing that you have to understand is that and where I'm from, the musculoskeletal world, inflammation is the major, how would you say, the major starting point of the healing process. But the problem with that is that if you have inflammation that exceeds its normal function, well, then it plays havoc in the normal function of the joint, right? So when you talk about rehab, you want to decrease the inflammatory world. You don't want to bring too much fluid into that joint because then it inhibits your healing and the recovery and the normal function of the joint. So when you talk about regenerative medicine, there's a component in there which is interleukin 10 that regulates inflammatory process and it slows it down. So then you have a better process of getting back into the rehab and the corrective movements to get yourself back to that normal function. So there's enzymes and the cytokines, and it really helps regulate the inflammatory world.
From a safety perspective, Dr. Tommy, what are the comparative risk profiles? Why might modulating signals be inherently safer than introducing live and proliferative cells?
Yeah. Going back to that same understanding about chromosomes and the DNA and the codes, when you inject a live cell into your body, you're injecting something that's going to replicate, turn into something, right? So that DNA is ready to do something. All it needs is a little bit of, how would you say, like a staging area, and it's going to do something. It's going to multiply into something. So in the old days, they would say stem cell therapy and then mesenchymal stem cells, they would do what they call differentiate into that cell. Well, it doesn't really do that. It's sort of impossible to have the same DNA that's in your body to match up with a donor site, correct? So what you do is you have to say, all right, if that's the case, if that cell that has a nucleus and a DNA chromosome goes into your body and it does something, it replicates and it miscodes, well, what's going to miscode into? It's going to miscode into something that's abnormal, and then we call that tumors, right? We don't want that formation in our body. We don't want that live cell. So you have to take the next step, which is the cell free, the one that doesn't have the chromosome, just has the signals, the information that gives the existing tissue to turn on and then regenerate. So that's what you want. That's the big safety factor, is that it's cell free. You don't want that chromosome or this information to turn into something that's abnormal to your body.
Dr. Tommy, in which clinical areas, whether musculoskeletal or neurological or system aging, have you seen the most compelling evidence for signaling outperforming cell based approaches?
So in my world, I'm musculoskeletal. I mean, there's nerves in there too, but musculoskeletal. So what I've seen in the typical tissue, when it looks at muscle, bone, tendon, ligaments, cartilage, it does great. It does fantastic, especially when it comes to like the superficial stuff that's not too deep, because you think about the penetration and the vascularity involved with this depth. So, but when it comes to nerves, when I think about nerves and how I tell people how it recovers, think about if you were the dentist and then you go to the dentist and you get that root canal and you still have that I mean the numbness is gone, but you still have that numbness in the sense of I can't feel my lower jaw or that particular area, I still have that ache. Well, the reason is that nerves take a longer time to regenerate. Those Schwann cells they call it. It takes a long time to get that myelinated sheath back to its normal operation. So that's why when it comes to nerves, it's a slower process. I've seen it get better, but we're talking about months up to a year of that type of feedback back from the patient saying, hey, I feel a little better now. Whereas when it comes to tendons, muscle, cartilage, bone, you get a better response right away. Right away, you start feeling the anti-inflammatory world that I don't feel that ache because the inflammation is reduced. Then weeks later, they start saying, I feel stronger. I can grip harder. I could do things more with that particular injured area. So that's what I specialize in. Now, I know there's a lot of research when it comes to the liver, the pancreas, cardiac tissue. There's a lot of great research when it comes to, regenerative medicine for that organ and the visceral stuff, but I'm not an expert with that. I'm more of the musculoskeletal world.
Dr. Tommy, what are the most promising sources or classes of regenerative signals you working with?
I think the biggest thing that, um, so I don't, I'm having uh, Daniel, I'm gonna tell you something right now that right now in my past, we've taken donor sites from the umbilical cord, from the Wharton's jelly, and then it's EVs, extracellular vesicles, and we obtain these signals of like, cytokines, proteins, all that stuff, right? So that's human tissue based donor site, right? So now we take the same signal and we're looking for something that's similar in that capacity in another source. And that source could be a form of plants, could be something else. That's what's very important right now is the transition from the human tissue and looking for equivalency in some other source, because the donor site is justifiably great. The problem is that you've got a problem with some of these labs out there that are not giving you an honest, like, a tissue uh, of these things. I mean, it's the FDA right now doesn't really regulate this industry as far as stem cells and regenerative medicine in this human tissue form. So that's why it's starting to become I would say unethical, but there is some compromising that's occurring out there with improper sites, improper tissue banking. So that side right now is being looked at by the FDA, and they're going to start really coming down on those guys. So that's why if you get to understand the signals that come from this particular donor site, from human tissue, and get comparables from some other source, that's the objective. I'd like to tell you more about it right now, but I can't because we're right now in the R&D world. So there's some great futures coming up pretty soon about that comparison. So I apologize for that.
No worries, Dr. Tommy. So, what does ideal longevity medicine protocol look like in your vision? Is it a periodic signaling boosting treatments or continuous modulation or something else?
It's got to be introducing. It's got to be some type of application to your body. So right now, presently, stem cell therapy or any type of regenerative medicine in this realm is injectables. So that's how you do injectables, right? Localized to a tendon, muscle, bone cartilage, or it could be an IV intravenously through your whole systemic body. And there's a couple other patterns you can do it, but the problem with that, you have to be in a clinical setting, you have to be with a medical doctor, and it has to be overseen by that environment, which now you have a cost that goes, with doctor, clinics, sourcing. So that's why it's very expensive. So
Mhm.
if you could, so I've developed regen that doesn't do the injectable, but more of a topical. So now it's in the hands of the patient. So now the patient is really involved with it and excluding the doctor, clinic, and the high cost. So once this sourcing gets perfected that I'm doing right now, now what you're going to see is it's in the patient's hands from start to end. So now their application is applied daily, and then it's going to be systemically to their body, and more importantly, it's at a lower cost and safer and no needles.
No needles. Yes. So before we wrap up our discussion for today, Dr. Tommy, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review sixth season this year, comedy 101 third season, and food 101 in sixth season as well. Geography 101 love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 in fourth season, Science 101, Sex 101 in the second season, and my baby podcast, Mental Health 101, Law 101, Bible Verses 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and Motivation 101. And please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Dr. Tommy, tell us what has been the most surprising and counterintuitive clinical outcome you witnessed using a signaling first approach.
I think the biggest outcome I saw was if you so you have these ligaments that hold the cervical, the neck spine correctly. So it basically avoids the slippage of the vertebrae to go, forward or backwards. When you go through a whiplash, you compromise this ligament called the ALL, right? It's an anterior longitudinal ligament. When it gets torn, it slips the actual disc or the vertebrae off, and it has degrees. Like they call it grades one, two, and three. And the more displaced you have it, the more severe the tear is of that ligament. So I've seen it where it was displaced pretty severely. It was displaced like maybe like 7, 8 millimeters of displacement. So that means that ligament was very compromised. So after using topical regen and then doing a pre and a post X-ray, we saw that the pre X-ray shows a displacement, but the post X-ray shows a large like return back to normal alignment. So that was fantastic finding on that. And that was a huge finding with the X-ray or pre and post.
Yes, and Dr. Tommy, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your projects, or anything you want to promote on Abstract Essay?
Hang on.
Mr. Tommy,
Yeah.
would you like to please invite
Oh
our
yeah, yeah.
listeners?
Yeah, you can go to my website at regen, RHEEGEN.com, and then see about the product Regen. And then you can go. I have a book at Amazon, The Future Regenerative Medicine, and just type my name after that. You'll see the book. And then any questions, just go to the website and hit info and ask me a question.
Yes, and one more question, Dr. Tommy. Looking ahead for 10 years, do you foresee cell based therapies finding a niche, or will they be largely suppressed by advanced signaling and cell free regenerative medicine?
You're going to see a big shift of the signaling. The signaling is the most important thing. Our body understands about these messages. We have to get the right signal. So once that signal is honed down, what I'm about to do, it's going to take off and it's going to really create that longevity in your lifespan from not just like, 70, 80, 90. We're going to the 120, 130, and then you're going to hear about these ages that exceed maybe 140 at one time. So
Yes, Mr. or Dr. Tommy, thank you so much for your time.
man, thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Modicom people, see you